I used about 90 to 95% recycled and repurposed materials for my home. The bricks that I used are bricks that I found from a house being demolished. And the shipping containers, they were old, used, retired shipping containers. And so I had like the containers, the brick, the concrete foundation, and some other textures on the house. And I wanted to unify all that. So I was like, you know what? How about some stripes?
Welcome to the Fluid Arts Podcast with your host, Kevin White, where we dive into the wonderful world of fluid arts, including acrylic pouring, alcohol ink, resin art, and more. In this podcast, we let talented artists share with us their techniques, inspirations, and tips for creating amazing fluid art. Whether you want to earn a living making art or improve your work, this is the podcast for you. So sit back and relax as we take you on a journey to learn more about this exciting and engaging art form.
Welcome to another episode of the Fluid Arts Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Jr., and today we have a very talented artist by the name of Smithey. Nice to meet you, Zach.
Likewise.
And then what Zach's going to be doing for us today is just kind of talking a little bit about his story and the backstory of how he did an acrylic pour on his home. So welcome to the Fluid Arts Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest questions I wanted to ask you was, how did you get started? I know you've created more than 3,000 original paintings. So can you kind of talk a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, so I've been making art since before kindergarten. My grandma was a professional artist. So back in elementary school, I was getting like college level critiques on my work whenever my grandma would babysit me, which at the time I didn't really realize that. But after I grew up, I was like, oh yeah, I was doing this like 15 years ago, which was nice. Got me a little bit of a head start. And I've been a full-time professional artist for the last 8 years. And I would even say I was full-time before that, back when I taught high school art for 7 years. But yeah, with no other jobs the last 8 years.
Okay, wow. Yeah, we have a lot of members in the community that are actually trying to, become full-time artists. So we'll talk a little bit about that towards the end. You're from St. Louis, right?
Yes. St. Charles, which is just outside of St. Louis. But yeah, I claim St. Louis.
Okay. With the teaching, can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I noticed from growing up and from teaching is that a lot of beginner artists want to say something with their work before they've sharpened their tools of the process of making art. And most of my life, I spent focused on the process of making art. So from realism to figures to portraits to abstract, I wasn't really trying to say anything until I felt confident that my skills were good enough to portray those messages that I wanted to say in my artwork when I wanted to say them. Sometimes, it's just art for art's sake. But yeah, I just process, focus on how, not what, how you're making the art first.
Nice. So if somebody has, a set of canvases that are, kind of laying around because they're procrastinating. I know I've experienced that myself where, hey, I want to create something. I have this photo of what I saw online and I want to recreate it. And it can kind of just go sitting for days just because the task seems kind of difficult at hand. Is that kind of what you've seen as well?
Yeah. And especially when I was teaching, you give the assignment and then the students sit there and stare at a blank canvas or piece of paper. And I would always tell them, don't sit there and think and look at this blank sheet of paper, because then you're getting zero feedback from this blank sheet of paper or canvas. So think in motion. I come up with a lot of good ideas when I'm like driving and you see a lot of stimulus as you're driving and you're seeing different things. And then those different ideas kind of come into your head, mash up, and then become something new, the output. I take all these different inputs. So I would suggest think in motion, make marks. It doesn't even have to be anything, but you'll start to see something in the marks that you're making or the paint that you're spilling, and then that will lead to an idea. So if you want to be productive, just start and don't think so much. The ideas will come to you.
Absolutely. And then when that's for the beginner, now what happens if you've been creating for, let's just say 10 plus years and you haven't quite made that switch? Because we have some members that are in that situation as well. What advice would you give for those who want to become full-time?
If you want to become full-time, you have to be full-time now. So even when I was teaching high school, I would get off work, go home, feed the dogs, let them out, and then go to the studio until 9, 10, or 11 at night and just work every weekday and then all day, every day on the weekends. So I was full-time even when I had another job. You can't put part-time effort into something and expect to get full-time results. So it's just the life of an entrepreneur. You never get the clock out.
Yeah, I can resonate with that. And I know a lot of our members can as well. So how did you end up finding the Facebook community, the acrylic pouring?
So I started pouring about 15 years ago. And at the time, I mean, I'd never seen pouring from anybody else. I kind of thought that I invented something new. And that was like pre-Facebook. Maybe MySpace is around, but nobody in the St. Louis art community was doing it. And I guess it was probably 5 or 6 years ago, I started getting tagged on like Facebook and all these different like pouring videos, and people are like, hey, look at this. Have you seen this? This is like what you're doing. I was like, damn it, it is. I'm not the only one. But it was also cool that there's like this broader community out there surrounding this topic of pouring. And so that led me into these different pouring groups.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love our community. Our community is so different, yet I can imagine that most other like art communities are the same in that sense, where everybody is supportive, everybody is encouraging, and all that good stuff that we have today.
Absolutely. And out of all the groups that I've seen on social media, the pouring groups seem to be the most active and like tight knit, sharing more art, having more feedback for others. Yeah, it's much more of a tighter community than other art communities that I've noticed.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. With the series, I noticed that you have a series. Now, this is probably something that you've, acquired over your lifetime of being an artist. But today we'll talk about the Stripe series. And, can we kind of tell the before and during and kind of after story of, what made you want to pour over the outside and the inside of your house?
Yeah, so as you kind of alluded to, I've got several different series bodies of work, stripes, pouring, Mark Twain, etc., texture, and these series have like they evolve. Like it's not just I don't set constraints and try to stay within those constraints. So sometimes like the Stripes series collides with my Waves series, which is my pouring series. And that's kind of what happened with my shipping container home, is that I was looking to unify all the different textures, because I used about 90 to 95% recycled and repurposed materials for my home. So like the bricks that I used are bricks that I found from a house being demolished. And the shipping containers, they were old, used, retired shipping containers. And so I had like the containers, the brick, the concrete foundation, and some other textures on the house. And I wanted to unify all that. So I was like, you know what? How about some stripes? And then I got to looking at the stripes. And so I did stripes going down my stairs. And then I was thinking there's got to be some way to unify like the floor and the stripes. So then like on my stairs, I did it to where the stripes poured onto the floor and created like a striped puddle. And then that then translated to the exterior of our home where I did a giant, it's a faux pour because I painted it to look like if the stripes were melting off and pouring off of my house would look like, poured onto my driveway. So the driveway, that faux pour is about 16 feet by 30 feet. But yeah, my house really stands out in St. Charles, and I wanted to do something to make it stand out even more. And that was like an extension of the artwork that I'm making in the studio.
Nice. So inside of your home, is that when we say the studio, you have a studio inside, right?
No, I've outgrown my home studios. I have a 12,000 square foot warehouse studio, and it's filled with hundreds of pieces of artwork. But I haven't even counted, but probably about 50 pieces of artwork in my home. But I try to separate the studio mess and creativity from my home life. So I'm at the studio all day, every day. That's where I work. I come home. That's where I relax.
Nice. I think that's a great balance, being that you're going to be, spending a full-time amount of, time already there, and you don't want to get burnt out at all, especially on a creative sort of journey.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So it sounds like it's an economical kind of reason to it as well, like using the bricks, using the containers. Was it something that ended up costing a lot less than if you were to say, hey, just build your own or purchase another already built home?
Yes. So I had renovated several homes over the years. Every time I would buy a home, I'd buy a fixer-upper, renovate it, live in it for a few years, and then sell it. And each time I did that, I was getting closer to something that was more personalized for me and my wife. And then finally, we're like, let's just build something. And we were thinking about all kinds of different creative ideas, and recycling and repurposing was one of the top priorities, and also economical. So we built this house. It's a little over 3,000 square feet, and it ended up costing us about $135,000, which I mean, that's somewhere around a little over $30 a square foot, which is unheard of. It's very economical.
Absolutely.
But if you were going to hire somebody to build that for you, it would be a lot more. Like now I have clients who hire me to build container homes for them, and our average price is $180 a square foot. Because there are a lot more hidden costs that weren't included in our home, because I built it almost entirely myself. And I had been collecting repurposed and recycled like free materials for years that I used on my home, which for time constraints, it doesn't really translate when you're trying to build for somebody else.
Exactly. Okay. So is this something that you've kind of learned along the way, or is this that full-time job that you mentioned earlier? Was it related to, construction and real estate sort of deal?
That was just another thing that I've just piled on top of all the other stuff that I do. besides the full-time teaching and the full-time art. Along the way, I would renovate a home and just teach myself how and learn new things with each home that we renovated. And by the time we got to the container home, I felt confident enough to just start from scratch and build it myself. Building a container home is a lot different than a normal home because we stack the containers in a day. So the entire home is there in a day. And instead of an additive process the entire time, it's additive for the first day and then subtractive after that. So it's like a big sculpture that you kind of carve into, cutting walls out and opening up the space and revealing the form within. It's like starting with a block of marble and carving, a figure from it.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Okay. I appreciate you explaining it that way. Now, with the containers that you do for other people's homes, do you put your own little like touch with it? Like, do you create any art to go inside of there?
If it's within their budget, yes. And so for my last client, they found me because they were one of my art collectors, and they wanted a contemporary home to feature their art collection. And so there's 9 containers, 3 stories tall. The whole first level is the living quarters. The whole second level is the master bedroom, suite, and balcony. And the whole third level is just pure art gallery, although their art is on all 3 levels. And so I already had artwork in their home, and they wanted something special for the bed that fit the home. And since I already built a cantilevered bed in my home, I wanted to build a cantilever floating bed for them. So it just comes straight out of the wall. It's just like a diving board, basically, just coming straight out of the wall with no legs underneath.
Wow.
So that was like the little personal touch that I gave them as a housewarming gift.
Nice. And I think that's kind of like bragging rights. I mean, was it in your hometown that you do, or you do it everywhere?
I'm open to building in other cities, but yeah, this one was in St. Louis, about 30 minutes from my house.
Nice. Okay. Well, I think that is amazing. Now, one other question I was going to ask you before we kind of head out here was, when it comes to you being, I know you consider yourself to be an art collector yourself, right? So
Yes.
what kind of makes you want to, when you see a piece of art, what makes you want to, be a collector of someone else's piece?
Like I want to create, so it's 2 parts. I want to support others in their journey because I empathize with their journey. It's a journey that I've been on my whole life and will continue to be on. But also, it's just like when you see something and you connect with it, it's just like any other art collector who isn't also an artist. You just still have that feeling like, I love this piece and I would like to live with it for a while.
Awesome. And I know a lot of people who I know that sell art, they have great success with coming up with like art stories and building on that connection and kind of expanding about it a little bit. Do you use art stories in how you sell your art?
You mean like a story for the piece?
Yes.
Okay. I do. It varies from piece to piece. Sometimes a piece, kind of out as I was talking about before, it's more of a study on the process of creating the artwork. So it's art for art's sake. In which case, the story is, this is me experimenting with the process. And in other pieces, yeah, there is a specific story for that piece. And then most of my work, I would say, falls under, the piece is like a paragraph in a book. And that that larger body of work is the whole story. And each piece is just a chapter or a paragraph of that larger story. And I find that buyers really like pieces that are a part of something bigger than itself. Like one of my series is back in like 2000, somewhere around 2006 to 2008, I started painting some Mark Twain portraits, and I thought, you know what, I really need to change up what I'm doing here. So I think this year I'm just going to do nothing but paint Mark Twain's portrait, and that is going to be my narrow constraint. And I want to see all the different ways that I can create this portrait. So the subject has been chosen. Now I can focus on the process. And it's almost like Andy Warhol's Marilyn Monroe or Campbell soup can. The repetition. It's like, yeah, there are thousands of those Campbell soup cans out there, but if you have one, you know it's a part of something bigger than just that one piece. And it just adds a little bit more validity or specialness to it. And really, like, it's intuitively like the opposite. Like, you would think that if you own something and thousands of other people had it too, that it might devalue it, but there's almost a sense of community there that you have one too.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, and I hadn't looked at it until just now that way. So I actually feel that feeling I think we're trying to describe right now, where it's like, yeah, I have this specific piece of painting. It could be the logo of, the Campbell soup can, but why don't you have one? Why aren't you part of this community?
Yeah, right.
Nice. Well, yeah, I think that was amazing. Definitely, there's a reason why you've been able to be successful in this area, and you're just going to keep continuing to do it. Well, Zach, so with the listeners, where should they go to check out, your style, if they want to buy some art, etc.?
I'd say the best two places are Instagram, and my Instagram handle is @ZachSmithy. That's spelled ZACKSMITHEY. So it's Smith with an EY at the end. And that's the same for my website and also my Facebook. Although Facebook gets a little cluttered with other stuff, but Instagram and website.
Well, awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you stopping by, Zach, and thank you for hopping on the Fluid Arts Podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
No problem. See you.
See ya.
If you enjoyed today's episode, then please like and share with your community. And please let us know if you have any suggestions for artists you'd like to hear on our show. This episode is sponsored by acrylicpouring.com. Acrylicpouring.com is the leading fluid arts website which provides fluid artists around the world the inspiration and tips they need. If you are new to fluid arts and want to get started now, then go to acrylicpouring.com to learn the 5 fundamentals of making beautiful acrylic pours for free. Also, join their Facebook community, where every day artists just like you are sharing their newest creations that just might end up on another one of these episodes.